Hey guys, I hope you're very well. My name is Ashling and you are very welcome here. Today, of course, I am here to talk about books, and more specifically, we're talking my November wrap up. So, November was very much a bit of a mixed bag, but that's okay. I read a few books physically and then I went a bit rogue and knocked a few off of my Kindle TBR as well, which is kind of unusual for me. But anyway, let's not ramble too much. Let's just get started. So, the first book that I read this month is one that is very well loved. It is a series of books at this stage, and it's like really cozy, kind of magic realism or fantasy. I would say more so magic realism, but first things first, the book itself is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So we're in a cafe, but not just any cafe. In this particular cafe, there is a chair in which you can sit in and you can travel in time. But there are many conditions in place relating to this time travel. So, one of the biggest ones is that you can only travel to your destination for as long as it takes for your coffee to go cold, and this destination must be this particular chair in this particular cafe. So it's a premise that I really looked forward to and was genuinely excited about. And I know that this series of books is really well loved. But sadly, friends, I just didn't share the same enthusiasm here. It just felt lacking to me in some sort of ways. So it is a book that's kind of split into four parts. So it's more like a book of short stories to me, if anything. And we follow different customers and different staff members as they travel through time in this cafe. So each kind of story is related to one particular person traveling through time. I feel like the author really told me what the characters were feeling rather than maybe showing me. It was very simple kind of language, which is fine. I don't mind that. It was very tell don't show. And I just felt like I kept confusing some of the characters because of this. They felt very one dimensional in many ways, and I couldn't connect with or empathize with them that much. The storytelling just felt a little bit detached and abrupt, which for me personally just didn't work very well. Also, the whole storyline reminded me a bit of something that maybe Matt Haig might have written, and I'm sorry to say it, but myself and Matt Haig have never really had the best relationship. I just don't really like his writing. I find his books a bit too sweet to be wholesome. Take from that what you will. I know he's very well loved as well, and this is very well loved. I just think it's not for me. I think it's not a this book thing. I think it's definitely a me thing. But it is a short enough read, and it's very well loved, as I said. So definitely don't let me put you off if you feel as though this is something that you actually personally could really enjoy. Because look, maybe I'm just a narky old sod and it was too wholesome for me. I don't know. But yes, anyway, that was the first book. So the second book then was a book. It hasn't been on my shelves for long at all, but it was one of those ones that I knew that I was going to read eventually and that I knew that I was going to buy eventually. So last month I was feeling a bit like, yeah, I want a bit of that. So the book is by the author James Baldwin, and I've been seeing quotes of his around kind of everywhere. And I was just feeling a bit like, do you know what? I think it's time. So next I picked up Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. And I'm glad that I did. So I've been aware of this book for a really long time. I know that it's really well loved. And well, friends, November 2023 came knocking, and I found myself going to my local bookshop to buy a copy that had sitting there on their shelves for about 2 years. I knew that because on their price tags they put the date that they actually put the price tag on the book on it. So the first thing that really struck me about this book was how exquisite James Baldwin's writing actually is. It was my first experience, as I said, of reading a novel of his, and the closest I had come to his stories was watching the movie If Beale Street Could Talk, which I thought was incredible as well. So I would really like to get around to reading that now too. I thought that I knew what this story would be about. I thought it was going to be a romance, like a classic romance, and that would be that. But I was wrong. I don't want to give away too much or anything at all, really, because I think like this book is only in around 150 pages. So I'll just say that it was so much darker than I was expecting. It was really heart-wrenching as well, but not in the way that I'd been anticipating. So many of the characters were really just so morally grey, and even now, weeks later, I can't tell you how I truly feel about them. I feel like that's a really good mark of an author who knows how to write characters, because nobody is this or this. Everybody's a bit grey in some way or another, right? So I just feel like he fleshed out the characters so well that it just felt like none of them were on any one side of the coin in terms of morality. As classics go, this one was written, I think, in about 1956. So it does feel relatively contemporary. And for me, I feel as though it was really accessible. I do have classic fear sometimes, but this one definitely is one that you can pick up and you can read, and you will get it. You will understand it. It won't scare the pants off you when you try to read it. Baldwin's writing is incredible. It's impeccable. I don't know why I didn't pick up a pen and underline a lot of quotes. I regret not doing it because I feel like I'm going to have to reread it and do it now instead. But hey, yes, I definitely would recommend this. As I said, it's only like 150 pages, it's really short. It is exquisite. Definitely a recommendation from me. And then onto something completely different. So we are back with a series that I started quite some time ago. Didn't love the first book, so I've just read the first book in the series and thought, okay, this is all right. Nothing spectacular, but it'll do. But I did hear that the second book really took things up a level. And boy, are we back with a bang. So, of course, the series that I'm talking about is A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And the second book in that series then is A Court of Mist and Fury by the same author. So we're back with the protagonist, whose name I never know how to pronounce. Is it Feyre? Fair? Who knows? I'm going with Fair because that's how I've heard it pronounced by other people. I just didn't really get the hype with the first book, as I've mentioned. I just didn't think it was bad, but I just thought that it wasn't for me. So the first book was definitely a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Didn't even really remember the plot, so I had to go look it up again. Because it's been a while and I can't remember books that I finished last week, which is why I'm reading notes here now. But anyway, so I went off and I read a detailed synopsis of the first book, and I won't lie, after that I did question whether or not I had really read the first book because I remembered so little of it. But anyway, off I ploughed into book two, feeling really optimistic, and I'm not sure how Sarah J. Maas did it, but she, oh my word, has really upped her game in terms of writing this second book. The characters feel so much more well-rounded, the world building has elevated so much, and honestly, it's really quite incredible in comparison. Look, I'm not going to say that this is objectively a great book because it is what it is, but boy, is it an enjoyable one. And I was very tempted to just go and buy the third book immediately and go straight into it, which is not something that I very regularly do at all. I tend to space out my series and then forget what the previous book was about and all of that, you know. I am who I am. This is not going to be for everybody. It is a romantasy or a romantic fantasy or one or the other. Apparently there is a difference. I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to get into that, but it isn't going to be for everybody. And when I was reading it, sometimes I felt like some of the kind of fey smut parts, I was like, what am I doing with my life? Really? But look, those scenes just aren't for me in general, I guess, and I'm happy to overlook it if it means that I can get on with reading the rest of the story. So yeah, I did really enjoy it, but it is what it is. And if you think, oh, I don't like fantasy, I definitely don't like young adult fantasy, I don't like that kind of writing, romantic fantasy, whatever, it's not going to be for you. But personally, I did love it, and I really look forward to picking up the third book in the series. Spoiler, I did actually pick it up. I bought it. I just haven't read it yet. So all was going so well there, and I was like, you know what? I feel like reading a cozy fantasy, and I did. I picked up my Kindle, looked what was on there, and I found a book called A Curious Beginning by Deanna Rayborn, and I believe that this is the first book in a series. I don't know what the name of that series is, and look, I don't really care. So we follow our protagonist, whose name is Veronica Speedwell, and she is an unorthodox lady who has traveled the world looking for different species of butterflies. So I learned a new word from this book, and that was lepidopterist. So that is somebody who is a butterfly collector or has an interest in butterflies. I'm not sure where the line is drawn, but yeah, there's a word I wasn't aware of before now. So we are set in London in 1887, and following the death of her aunt, Veronica finds herself having to flee her home with the help of a German baron who holds the key to a lot of questions about her childhood. So she doesn't know her parents, she doesn't know her mother, and she knows very little of her own personal history. Following a murder, how vague of me, Veronica becomes caught up in a series of quite dangerous events that could end her life. So she meets this man and they kind of pair up together and off they go. They flee Veronica's home and they try to figure out what the hell is going on. So I found myself becoming very bored by this book. And this book feels like it was something that should have been incredibly engaging, but for me, it really just wasn't. I didn't like the tone of the storytelling, which was very kind of sarcastic in a lot of ways and just very like, I guess, supposed to be funny, but I don't tend to enjoy funny things. I love to laugh, don't get me wrong, but I probably laugh at things I shouldn't. Not saying that I'm really mean about my humor, but just I find things funny that other people don't find funny. And I've mentioned this before in a video. I'm getting deja vu here now. I was in the mood for a cozy mystery, and this one has actually been recommended to me personally. I can't remember by who, so if it was you, I'm sorry, I just didn't enjoy it. This is one mystery that I just would have left unsolved if I had known what was coming, and I'm sad to say that I won't be continuing with the series following this book. It was grand, like, but not for me. Not for me. I tell you what was for me though, the next book that I read. So I find that I read physical books a lot. But after I read a book on my Kindle, I go through a phase then where I read lots of books on my Kindle because I'm like, oh, this is so convenient and it's so much easier to read this lying down than it is to read like a physical book. And so I read In the Dreamhouse by Carmen Maria Machado. Chef's kiss. Honestly, I don't often read nonfiction. It's just not for me in a lot of ways. And especially memoirs, I just find them to be a little bit self indulgent, and isn't that the point? So, yeah, they're not particularly for me. I read Machado's book of short stories, Her Body and Other Parties, and it came as close to perfect for me as a book of short stories has ever come because, you know, with short stories, there's always going to be one or two that just don't hit the mark for you. So I knew eventually then that I would have to read In the Dreamhouse, and I've heard such good things about it, and I'm so glad to say that there's a reason for that. So this is a memoir that's centered around a couple of tumultuous years that the author had spent in a relationship with another woman, and this is a relationship which was sadly emotionally abusive and coercive. And I really love that this book draws light to that because I feel like still we often see abusive relationships as only relationships whereby they're physically abusive, and we don't give the time and space to relationships that are equally as harmful where nobody actually lays a hand on another person physically. Anyway, this could have been such a woe is me story, and rightfully so. It has every right to be, but Machado subverted the storytelling in a way that's just so fucking clever. Not so clever that you lose the emotion of the story. It is such a wonderful and yet tragic book. I know it's bad to say that you really loved a story about abuse, but for what it's worth, I really loved this book. There's even a chapter in here that's based on the old choose your own adventure idea, and I won't say any more about that, but the way that it's done is just magnificent. I don't know how to speak about this book. I just know that it's really important, and I personally went through something like this like quite a long time ago, and it took me a long time to say that it was abuse. And I feel like this story was paralleling mine in a similar time, and so there was no way that I ever would have had this book. But I feel like if I'd had this book at the time, I really would have been able to see it for what it was and to be able to call it what it was. And thankfully, look, I got out of that situation and whatever. But I do feel for little girls like me who are lost and in their early 20s and don't really know what they're doing with their lives and are a bit vulnerable. I feel like this is an important one because it calls it what it is. And I know we've come a long way, but I still feel like we are not doing enough for people in this sort of relationship where we see these things going on. And look, it's hard to see a friend in a situation like this, and it's hard to see somebody and to pull them out of it because we're all going to do what we're going to do, right? But I just feel like this is an important one, and I just want to give it that little platform. So my teeny tiny little YouTube channel, I will say that this is such a good book, and I just really, really recommend it. Not just for the story that it tells, but for the way that it's told. It is magnificent, and I can't wait, or I really hope that Machado writes more books because I will eat them whole, I swear. Down the gullet in one. So then the next book that I read was another young adult fantasy. So I guess I was in a bit of a mood this month. And this one was Belladonna by Adeline Grace. So you have probably seen this book pop up on Bookstagram, Book Talk, Booktube, and here I am adding my 2 cents about it as well. So in this young adult novel, we follow Signa, who is a 19-year-old girl who was orphaned as a baby. She's had a string of guardians, and each of them has been more interested in her wealth than her well-being. So she hasn't actually come into her wealth yet. I think it's when she's 21 or 20 when she's due to come into this wealth. So strangely enough, each of these guardians has met an untimely death. Is that to do with Signa? Is that coincidence? I'm not going to tell you. So the last remaining family that she has left are the Hawthorns, and these are a wealthy family who are living in a great manor called Thorn Grove. Signa is welcomed into their home after her previous guardian has passed away, and this is where the story really gets started. So the lady of the house passed away the year prior, and the remaining family are each still grieving for her in their own ways. So her husband faces his grief by throwing these elaborate parties, and while that's all going on, their son tries to grapple with the family business kind of falling by the wayside, and he wants to pick up where his dad is slacking off, and he basically wants to take over the family business. And then unfortunately we have their daughter who's a teenager as well, and she is sadly succumbing to the same illness that her mother succumbed to. So this is an illness that nobody has ever managed to put a name to, and it's a bit of a mystery. And yeah, so what I haven't mentioned thus far is that Signa can actually see spirits and ghosts. So I can see dead people. Pulling up the little blankie. But yeah, she's haunted by the ghost of Mrs. Hawthorne, who soon lets Signa know that her death actually wasn't due to natural causes and was in fact murder, and she wants Signa to help her to save her daughter before it's too late. Now, I won't say too much more. Oh, also, this novel is set like in high society, so we do see our heroine grappling with being a proper lady or maybe potentially following her own path. This book is heavily a romance as well, just so you know. And it's look, I'm not here to kink shame, but each to their own. It was a bit bizarre for me. This novel is definitely just a bit of fun, and it was the mystery in this that kept me reading. It is what it is. I do know that this novel has been really well loved, but again, it's just not one that hit the mark for me, unfortunately. It wasn't a new favourite. I know that there is a sequel to this book as well, and I don't know if I'll read it. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not in any hurry to pick it up anyway. And then book number 7, so last but not least, I picked up a cozy sci-fi. So I have heard so many good things about this series. So it is Becky Chambers' Wayfarer series. So I decided to pick up the first book in the series, which has been on my Kindle for a very long time. I have the whole series on my Kindle. I got them really cheap. And the first book is called The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So our Rosemary doesn't expect much when she joins a crew on the Wayfarer. So this is a ship that has certainly seen better days, but it offers her a home, a place to sleep, a place to start again, and of course, a found family, which is a trope that I always, always love in a book. Life upon the Wayfarer is about to become very dangerous, and that's because their captain has taken on a new job, a much bigger job than they would be used to, much higher stakes, and definitely something out of the scope of anything that they've worked on before. So basically, they're tunneling wormholes in space, and this one is bigger and further than anything that they've ever worked on before. This novel comes in at more than 500 pages, which is fine, except there were points where I just felt like, come on, get on with it. The plot, while it does follow a very particular trajectory, it was quite loose in a lot of parts, and I found it quite difficult to get into some of it. I just found that some of the difficulties that they faced, I was a bit like, all right, like, come on, get on with it. It just felt like some of the things didn't really move the story forward, and maybe if this book had been edited down a bit, I would have enjoyed it that bit more. I think I warmed to it a lot more once I hit the 40%ish mark, but I mean, at that point, many people would DNF a book, right? But here I am, knowing that I have the following books on my Kindle too, so on I ploughed. I know that this book is really well loved, and for me, I just found it didn't quite hit the mark again. That said, as I've mentioned, I have the rest of the series on my Kindle, and I have checked, and the rest of the books are quite a bit shorter. I think they all fall within the 300 to 400 page mark, which is a lot better than 500 plus pages. So I will probably give the next ones a go. We'll see, at some point anyway. So that's that for me. Those are the 7 books that I managed to read in November. As I said, very much a hit and miss kind of month for me, which is fine. I definitely tried some books that I wouldn't normally pick up. Some were hits, some were misses, some that I expected to be really good weren't so good, and Giovanni's Room was great. So there's that. Let me know what you've been reading, what you're planning to read in December. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for still being here. You may have noticed I'm a bit more low energy today. My setup is a bit different, but that's okay. I'm not going to apologize. I feel tired, and here I am recording a YouTube video anyway, just to talk about books, because what do I love if not a good book? If you feel like it, please do like this video. Please do subscribe. Chat to me down in the comments. I do take a while, but I promise I will get back to you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're minding yourself. Thanks so much for sticking with me. And I'll talk to you next Sunday. Bye bye.